Good evening, and on behalf of Remembering Srebrenica's London and Southeast Region and Board, thank you for joining us for the 26th anniversary commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide. My name is Dina Shabic El Reyes, and I am a second-generation survivor of the war in Bosnia. It is my privilege to be your compeer and to welcome you to this special online commemoration event. Tonight, we will pay tribute to the 8,372 victims and survivors of the genocide in Srebrenica, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which took place 26 years ago on European soil, just 50 years after the Second World War. As we honor victims and survivors tonight, we must remember that genocide does not happen overnight. It begins when hatred and intolerance are left unchallenged. I would like to begin by introducing Safet Vukalic, one of the community champions of Remembering Srebrenica in London and Southeast Region, to formally welcome you to tonight's commemoration.
Good evening, and on behalf of Remembering Srebrenica's London and the Southeast Board, thank you for joining us for the 26th anniversary commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide. I am Safet Vukalic. Srebrenica Memorial Day is to remember the 8,372 Bosnian Muslims who were systematically murdered and buried in mass graves culminating in a campaign of ethnic cleansing used by Bosnian Serb forces during the conflict. Today, as we mourn, remember and honor those we lost, let us also reflect on the suffering and resilience of those who survived and were forced to rebuild their lives, and recognize their perseverance in continuing to fight for truth and justice. This year's theme, Rebuilding Lives, aims to honor the 2 million people who were displaced during the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Bosnia in the 1990s, leaving them to seek refuge all over the world, with approximately 10,000 Bosnians coming to the UK. We are honored to be joined today by the brave survivors who will share their stories. We hope they will allow everyone to learn from those who have shown enormous resilience in rebuilding their lives. We are proud of the support our community champions, local councils, libraries, churches, mosques, synagogues and schools, bringing communities together through acts of commemoration. On this day, let us all pledge to work together and commit to building stronger communities that cherish diversity, stand against hatred, intolerance and prejudice. Tonight is important not just for remembrance, but as a lesson for future generations.
Thank you, Safet, for your opening remarks and for everything that you are doing to help bring communities together in the UK. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amra Shabic El Reyes, who is a professor, author, survivor, and activist who grew up in Bihać, Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is an honor for me to introduce Dr. Amra.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dina, for your kind introduction. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to Remembering Srebrenica, London and Southeast for inviting me to join you this evening. I want to begin by sharing with you one of my memories of Srebrenica from early 1992. When I first met a young man from Bratunac, Mohammed was unlucky to be 17 or 18 at the time because it got him drafted into the obligatory one-year military service every boy had to serve in the Yugoslav National Army after graduating from high school. At the time, Mohammed started to realize that the Yugoslav National Army was not our protector, but instead our people's and our country's aggressor. He was in the midst of his service to a nation that no longer was his own. This young man from Srebrenica risked being executed by deserting the Yugoslav National Army. My family helped save him, at least that time. My parents, Mehmed and Delista, saved a number of boys like Mohammed who didn't want to be part of the atrocities that the Yugoslav National Army, which was de facto the Serb army was beginning to commit throughout the former Yugoslavia. I write about my encounter with Muhammad in my memoir, The Cat I Never Named, a true story of love, war, and survival. I was 16, close to Muhammad in age when my family took him into our home. We were teens, terrified of what was to come. My parents saved innocent boys like Muhammad from the army of their haters by hiding them in our house, giving them a change of civilian clothes from my older brother Ammar, and buying them a train or a bus ticket to return to their own families. Ammar, my brother, died before the war and would have been happy to know that what was left of him was saving lives of other young men. Muhammad sang beautifully and dreamed of returning safely to his family in Srebrenica. We didn't take his phone number or his address or even his last name. We didn't know back then that our lives would irreversibly change that spring of 1992. And to this day, I wonder if Muhammad ever made it back to Srebrenica. The next memory of Srebrenica I have is from 1995. We would sit every day by the radio in our kitchen that was connected to our car battery, hoping to hear the news of the humanitarian intervention that would save us. Like people in Srebrenica, we were exhausted and starved in Bihać. We had no food or strength left in us for another harsh Bosnian winter. In the summer of 1995, there was suddenly an increased talk in Bihać that the UN has decided to protect us, or at least those Bosnians who lived in the 5 UN proclaimed safe zones that included both Bihać and Srebrenica. We were told in Bihać that we had to give up whatever little weapons we had so that the UN could take on the role of our protector from the Serb army. We also learned from the local leaders that Srebrenica would be the first safe area to experience the full protection of the UN. I was hopeful that our lives would begin to normalize. Throughout the military siege under which the Serb forces kept us for longer than the infamous siege of Leningrad during World War II, every day someone I loved, I knew, or played with was blown up. On a good day, it was a friend of a friend. On a bad day, it was a family member or classmate I grew up with. But then Srebrenica happened. Instead of hope, peace, an end to our suffering, we heard of the exodus, of the mass executions, of the killings of children, of the eradication of the people of Srebrenica, and of the UN miserably failing to deliver on their promise to protect Bosniaks from the Serb forces. For Serb soldiers, we were just vermin, free for them to shoot at or capture, theirs to use. The lesson that I learned that July 11th in 1995 is that our survival then and the rebuilding of our lives today are both solely in our hands. And that process of rebuilding begins by telling our stories and acknowledging the genocide and atrocities of the past. This is why my own work today as an educator, author, and a Bosnian genocide survivor has centered on building our collective resilience to hate. As anyone who has lived through trauma knows, we tend to internalize tragic experiences rather than place them on a public display. But it is our responsibility to remember and speak out against hate because of our friends, classmates, and relatives, young men like Muhammad, who have been targeted, dehumanized, othered, detained, imprisoned, tortured, or killed simply for who they are. They will never have their chance to share their stories. Another reason why it is critical that we show the world how genocide survivors can rebuild their lives is that a Bosnian story of ethnic persecution may at first seem distant and perhaps not relatable to many of our neighbors and colleagues wherever it is that we might live and work today. But the violence and exclusion we're witnessing around the world, including in the United States and the UK, mirror our own stories. Whether one is targeted because of the color of their skin, because of the God they choose to pray to, because of who they want to love, because of their ethnic origin, their immigrant background, their poverty, their physical disability or mental illness, their exclusion echoes our own. I want my daughters, Dina, whom you already met, and her sister, Jana, to grow up in a more inclusive and peaceful world. So I ask you today that in honor and memory of the Srebrenica genocide victims, you join me in magnifying voices of all survivors of genocide in Srebrenica and genocide in the entire Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that all of us together and united can become change makers for and together with our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. For fellow Bosnians around the world, Srebrenica Memorial Week is a difficult and painful time, and a reminder of the inhumanity they experienced. While I obviously wasn't a part of the genocide, I see the effects it has on my mother, uncle, and grandmother. We all remember stories passed down from generations and the strength embodied by each person. Many survivors are forced to relive their pain on a daily basis. I would now like to introduce Yasmin Yusufovich. During the genocide, numerous male members of Yasmin's family were murdered. Just by sheer luck of being tiny, being kids, only 4 of the boys survived in the family. We are honored to have Yasmin with us to share his poem, I Once Lived in a House.
I once lived in a house. If they had told me before how many times a man can die, I would have found a horse to run and flee. First, we all died. They took our fathers. They took our honor and dignity. They took our sanity and made us into fools because we trusted. I died when I buried my first. And then I died when they did not acknowledge me. I died again when I buried my third. I died afterwards when they did not believe me. I died each time until I buried my 33rd. Now I only wish to live long enough to bury my last. I once lived in a house under a sloped roof. I used to herd goats and sheep. I used to run after my brothers, to begging them to take me to their schools. I used to cling to my father's feathers, begging him to teach me how to fix trucks. The roof on our house had not seen 5 decent snows when a neighbor came knocking on our door to say that our house was no longer ours. I was still too young to realize that a person with a gun cannot bluff. Hungry goats and sheep, unfinished schools, a truck in disrepair. My mother's knitted handcrafts and dinners, all uneaten, unfinished, were stolen by a soulless man, claiming the right to our dreams and the things that were all new to him. After that, we knew we could not have anything of our own, except for glances, intertwined fingers, and shelters in each other's breasts, which held the quivering heart fearing petrification in face of hopes, dreams, and prayers. Soon afterwards, father lost all of his hair. My mother forgot how to knit. The oldest brother, the one in college, decided to stand up against the evil. My mother begged him, "Do not go, son, you might kill someone." "I will not take the gun, mother. I will just carry water." My father looked into his eyes, bit into his lip, and turned his tear-filled eyes into the darkness. My brother closed the door, and mother started in whispers to count the rest of us. Suddenly, as if a whole mountain had collapsed, as if someone had blackened the sun, they took, in front of our eyes, the father and the rest of our brothers. And ever since then, July, summers, and Tuesdays are not what they used to be. My mother could recognize her neighbors. They were invading her with their hateful looks. In a stranger's world, at the window, mother was continuously whispering, calling out names, giving them to the wind, weeping and fading. And so she still does, even after an entire generation had come to pass. They want to repair my house, and yet they wonder, why would me and my mother need a big house? And I can't find the words to explain to a stranger how that house had raised 7 people, stout and fearless, full of dreams filling 4 rooms. And now I'm afraid of my own. Will I do, or will I die? For goodness is our curse. I will not be able to keep the door latched next time when the neighbor comes at the door knocking. Even after all this struggle, I have to pick up my strength and be the bearer of the news to my mother that the only thing they are bringing now to her, out of 5 of our murdered dear ones, are just 2 bones.
Your poem shows how pain never leaves an individual. Memories make scars on your mind as pain creates wounds in your heart. We know those who love us will sit beside us as we cry our tears and wonder why we had to endure these wounds. Your writing also carries on the stories of those you've lost. That's why we're here. So we never let death and hate truly kill a person. We will keep the memory of them alive. We will keep their love and their courage alive. We're aware of the men and boys killed and of the sexual crimes committed against the women and girls in Bosnia. But the impact of the genocide on children growing up during this time and the trauma they have endured as a result is often forgotten. Children can be considered the hidden victims of war. My mom was only 2 years older and my uncle 2 years younger than me when the genocide in Bosnia started. It's been 26 years since the genocide of men and boys in Srebrenica, but every year more bodies are found and buried, and every year the survivors, mostly women, return to commemorate their fathers and brothers, husbands and sons. It is now my pleasure to introduce Podrinje and Bratunac, Women's Association President Shuhra Sinanovic. Shuhra Sinanovic and the mothers of Srebrenica continue their fight for truth and justice, and we are grateful to them for sharing their inspiring stories of courage.
Shahidi hey milenici, gdje ste vi? Kraj česme hej stoji peškir vezeni i bardak hej od kojeg smo stvoreni. Šehidi hej milenici, gdje ste vi? Šehidi hej milenici, gdje ste vi?
Ovako, ja sam Šuhra Sinanović, predsjednica Udruženja žena Podrinja Bratonsko i bavimo se nestalim osobama 92-95. Inače, sam iz Bratunca, rođena sam Bratunčanka i udala sam se u Bratunac i međutim živjela sam u mjestu Bjelovac gdje sam se udala u porodičnoj kući sa svekrom rahmetli i sa mužem i sa 2 malo djece dok nije izbio rat. Znači 11. maja 1992. godine napuštamo svoju kuću i svoje imanje, svoje bogatstvo ostavljamo u ruke maltene da kažemo zločincima koji su izvršili agresiju, genocid na Bosnu i Hercegovinu početkom 1992. godine i završili 1995. Ja sam bila sa svojim mužem, sa mojom porodicom u Srebrenici. Od mojih bližnjih nisam imala sa moje strane nikoga, jedne ubijeni, 8 je njih ubijeno 1992. godine. Ja sam bila čitavo vrijeme, znači od 1992. od 2. juna u Srebrenici do 11. jula 1995. godine. Međutim, u Srebrenici kad je počelo granatiranje od 7. jula, više se nije znalo ni za šta. Oni bombardovanje i ovo i granatiranje i opet jedna granata padala pored moju zgradu gdje moja djeca opet u sobi ostaju nijema od detonacije. I Allah mi je sačuvao i pored mene je galer u zid se, ali niti je njih ranio, niti je ranio mene. Valjda je Allah dao da ostanu mi žive, a da nemaju svog oca, da nemaju svog amča, da nemaju svog dedu, da nemaju svog nikoga od te muške. I svi smo iščekivali nekako dolazi vijest bombardovanje, da će se srpski položaj bombardovati, da će avijacija biti, da ćemo se spasiti tog haosa. Međutim, do tog nije faktički ni došlo i samo sam negdje možda 11. oko 11, 12, ne znam tačno sad. Moj muž rahmetli je došao, moj djever, samo da se poselami s nama u onolikom haosu, onolikoj gužvi. To smo im dali. I uzeo je ovako u naručje oba dvoje djece, pozdravi se s ocem s nama i ovako su oba dvoje djece u naručje zagrije. I onda meni kaže, samo ne može da se rastavi. Kaže, Žuro, čuvaj mi dobro djeca. To su bile njegove poslednje riječi koje sam izgovorio. Ja sam mislila da to ne može da bude. Ali on kod je predosjećao da faktički da neće onaj prići. Moj Muriz u 32. godini da ne dođi. Ja sam njih ispratila i djevera i njeg i ta zgrada gdje sam bila u tom stanu je gledala prema pošti u Srebrenici. Ja sam izašla na balkon i onda da ih ispratim i moj svekar rahmetli meni kaže, nemoj, vrati se snaho, bit će avijacija, čuješ emo avioni. Ja sam sve gledala i oni su prema kazanima i ispod mezarja u kazanima i moj vid. Ja sam ih sve posmatrala dok god nisu iza mog vidika otišli. Po onoj anketi i evidenciji koje je udruženje Pokret majke enklava Srebrenica i Žepa uradilo tad i mi sa njima, je 10.701 osoba nestala. A tamo na kamenu piše 8.372 i 3 tačke. To nije konačan broj. A mi znamo, to je samo utvrdila Republika Srpska kad je bilo tad da su oni toliko ubili. Međutim, naša borba traje i sa ekshumacijom, identifikacijom. Ni jedna grobnica nije otvorena. Da nismo sa svojim porodicama otišle. Odnijele ručak što možemo da pripremimo ljudima koji radi. Ali šta smo njima im pomogli? Koliko smo mi pronašli porodice, koliko između sebe da dođemo do tih grobnica. Da dođeš pa mora tužilaštvo, pa mora institut, pa mora svi da dođu, pa ovo, pa probno kopanje, pa da se otkriju, pa to. Međutim, naša borba traje i trajeće do posljednjeg osobe i posljednjeg našeg daha. Prvo, ne znamo dokad ćemo mi živjeti od danas do sutra. Ali ovo je jedna velika tragedija, velika tuga, jedan genocid koji je se desio na prostoru Bosne i Hercegovine. Molim vas, omladino, pišite knjige, čitajte i ispitujte šta je se desilo u genocidu u Srebrenici. Molim vas, školujte se, škola je prvobitna. Da imate obrazovanje, da imate neko zvanje. A ja sam ponosna prvo na dragog Allaha koji me uputio na pravi put i ja sam svoju djecu tako, ja mislim, uputila. Iako sam izgubila svoje 23 člana u Srebreničkom genocidu, ostala sam na nogama i izvela sam djecu na salamet. Imam jednog sina koji je završio fakultet, oženio se, imam jedno unuče prekrasno koji će sad 2 godine, imam ćerku koja je medicinu završila. Zato i nikad nemojte pomisliti na neku osvetu, na neku mržnju. Mržnja ne donosi nikakvo dobro, samo mora donijeti zlo. I molim vas, možete naučiti od nas koji smo sve prevazišle, koji smo sve... Ja znam majke koji su po 5 sinova, moja Munira je 5 sinova izgubila. Ali ona neće da priča, neće da izbaci iz sebe. Ima i tih osoba koje ne mogu. Ali da nije bilo nas, ovih manjina, da se nije mezari uradilo pod čarma, da nismo svjedočile, da nismo išli po ekshumacijama, po tužilaštvima, pravile mitinge, ovo, ono, ne bi se ništa znalo ni za Srebrenički genocid. I ne bi ni bilo ni memorialnog centra, ali eto, zahvaljujući ovoj jednoj manjini žena Sve smo to uradili.
Thank you for sharing such a personal and moving testimony. Your strength in seeking justice for survivors like yourself and the mothers of Srebrenica is inspiring. I've always been shown pictures of the mothers of Srebrenica and the graves they sit by. I'd be and still am horrified at the fact the people, human beings with a conscience, could do such a thing. I don't even focus on the fact that it was largely Serbs, but simply people who committed such horrific crimes against humanity. While some create pain and suffering knowingly, there are others who rise to the occasion and work to make the strength and humanity of survivors and those who've been killed recognized and seen. Thank you. We're now proud to share with you a video of second-generation survivors from the London and Southeast region reciting the Srebrenica prayer.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate,
we pray to Almighty God.
may agreement become hope,
May revenge become justice.
May mothers' tears become prayers.
And Srebrenica never happens again.
To no one and nowhere.
Thank you to the children and their parents who have worked with us recently. As we remember and honor the victims and survivors of the genocide, tonight and during this Memorial Week, let's encourage others and ourselves to stand against hatred in all forms. Let's build a more tolerant society here in London and the Southeast, in the UK, and everywhere in the world. As we come to a close, we thank all speakers, musicians, community champions, and most importantly, the survivors for being a part of this memorial event, sharing their personal stories, and for all their hard work in raising awareness of the genocide. As we heard earlier, this year's theme is Rebuilding Lives. We will remember the courage and strength of survivors who, despite the horrendous hatred and destruction they were subjected to themselves, have been rebuilding their lives with dignity, love, and humanity. And without calling for retribution or promoting division or hatred. This is all the more remarkable and inspiring. We therefore hope that the theme of rebuilding lives will bring communities together to remember and learn from the past to help build a stronger and safer and more cohesive society here in the UK. Thank you for joining the 26th anniversary commemoration. Please do stay with us as we pay tribute to all 8,372 victims of the Srebrenica genocide with music and composing from Elvir Solak and singer Aida Čorbečić. Thank you.
brza, ko što bješe divnih dana. Po ružama ne sad prska bistra voda, šader